Welcome back to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker, the weekly radio show that informs and educates you on how to buy or sell real estate with Barb Schlinker, the owner broker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of the program. We air Your Real Estate Voice every Saturday, and if you can't listen to the entire show, it is always available on Barb's site, barbhasthebuyers.com, or search Barb. You'll find her on most of the popular podcast platforms like iHeartRadio. Now, Barb, a real estate sale is a business and legal transaction that must be in writing. I know the contracts can be very intimidating for some folks, but you've been doing this for a while. Can a home seller change their mind after accepting an offer here in Colorado?
Well, Richard, I had somebody tell me once you can't ever force anybody to buy and you can't force anybody to sell. But if the buyer wanted to press it, they could take you to court, get damages, sue you, and make you sell and do all three. So I don't know why there's such a big stick against home sellers in this state. There's no stick against inspectors, and they create all kinds of issues for me. But that's just how the contracts are written. The buyers have all kinds of opportunity to bail out of the contract and get their deposit back. No harm, no foul. But in the meantime, the seller has to basically tie up their property with this buyer, waiting for them to go through all of the different due diligence hoop jumps until it's a firm deal. And so sellers don't love that part of the way our state contracts are written. I don't either. But at least if they have some good information about what to expect, it's not quite so frustrating for them. In the state of Colorado, all licensed agents must use the form that we've been provided because we're not attorneys. We're supposed to understand what's in the contract, but we're not lawyers. And really all we're qualified to do in the form of practicing law is fill out the template form that they gave us. That is it. Now, there's a few agents that will start adding these big blue extraordinary paragraphs, and that's when I start getting a little bit nervous. As an example, the seller, get this, Richard, imagine getting this in a contract. The seller must disclose anything that affects the future value or the buyer's future use. Would you sign that?
I would not, and I would have to have a discussion and a negotiation between attorneys and the parties involved because that is so open. I don't even really know what that would entail. It just sounds like any possible thing that could happen at any possible time in the future that would have an impact, financial or otherwise, would be under consideration. That's as a former
Is
trial attorney, I would not sign that.
Yeah. And I was first time I saw it, I'm like, whoa, danger, Will Robinson, what the heck is this? And I kept seeing it over and over again in the contract. So what these agents do is they get offers, they see it in there and go, oh, that's cool. Let me use that little phrase in the contract. So I finally asked one, I said, where did this come from? And she goes, oh, a lawyer wrote it. I'm like, oh, yeah, I bet a lawyer that really wants lawsuits to happen because asking a seller to guarantee the buyer's future use is, to me, it's insanity. It really puts the seller on the hook after closing forever. So some of the stuff that happens is really interesting to me. So you want to make sure as a home seller that you're protected and you understand everything that's in the contract. That's how it was supposed to be written, that the consumers understand what's going on and there's no legalese built in there that's confusing to them. And some agents just shove an agreement and have their client sign it, and they don't have to explain it. I'd like to explain it. But anyway, at the end of the day, all agents have to use the same form. And within that form, the buyers have 8 to 10 different ways to bail out and get their earnest money back. No harm, no foul. And the sellers are thinking, okay, this is great. I got a contract. I've sold my house. I'm going to start packing. I'm getting ready to move. And oops, no, but it's only going to happen if the buyer gets approved for the loan, if the buyer likes their loan, if the buyer likes the title work, if the buyer is satisfied with the survey, if the buyer is satisfied with the HOA, if the house passes the inspection, if the house passes the appraisal, and the buyer doesn't change their mind at the 11:30 hour. All those opportunities are built into the contract that they could literally walk away and get their earnest money back at the closing table. No harm, no foul. And in the meantime, the seller has got their house off the market for 30 days, waiting for these buyers to do their quote due diligence. And it's really, really frustrating when they have a deal blow up. So the question is, can sellers, cancel that deal and move on to the next? First of all, they can accept a backup offer. Backup offer, basically, once they've accepted a contract, is a legal written business contract between buyer and seller to sell this piece of property. They can't, the seller can't really bail out, right? Unless the buyer asks for something outside of the original contract, like, hey, I want a new furnace, I want new windows, I want fries with that too. That does happen sometimes. The seller doesn't have to agree to it. And if the buyer is still back in the buyer's court, if they don't withdraw their objection or their request for stuff, then the buyer could get out and move to the next buyer. But if they do withdraw, they're moving forward. So I remember one time when they first changed that little provision in the contract, I had somebody call me. He wasn't my client, thank God, because he was under contract for a house and he didn't really understand that he wanted this house, but he asked for a long laundry list of repairs. And the seller had a backup offer sitting there. So the seller's like, well, I'm not going to do any of these repairs. He just didn't answer the objection. And the buyer didn't say, okay, forget it, I'm going to withdraw my repairs and buy this house. His agent didn't tell him to do that. And so the buyer lost the house. And then I was the recipient of the phone call after the fallout where he lost the house that he wanted. And he was pretty upset. But that's why it's so important that when you hire a real estate agent, they really understand what's going on. So the question is, what happens next within the contract? When can the seller confidently start packing and be 100% sure that this is going to go through? So usually the most common way deals will fall apart is over an inspection. So in the state of Colorado, there's no license to be an inspector. Anybody could be an inspector, which is really scary. And some of the things that they do, like just last week, some doofus inspector decided to check the sewer line. He pulled the little square cap off of there. The seal inside dropped down the sewer line and is clogging it up. It's like, oh my God, that's it. No more. I've got this new rule starting this week that I'm telling anybody else that gets a contract on my listing, don't touch the sewer line. If your buyer wants to check it out, you bring in a licensed plumber that knows what they're doing, because these guys are not qualified to do it. And different states are different. Like in Texas, the buyers only have 10 days to do their due diligence. And at that point, the deposit is non-refundable. That is not the case here. The buyer could bail out at the closing table and still get their earnest money back. So if you hire an agent that knows how to protect you from that, that would be the best way. Another issue could be the appraisal. So inspection is about the systems. Appraisal is about the opinion of value by a licensed person. And that licensed person has to confirm that the home meets the loan guidelines. So it's different for different loans. Like I just met an appraiser yesterday, and he was looking in the crawl space. He's looking for water in there. He has to check the attic. He's looking for peeling paint because of the type of loan. That kind of stuff is really good for agents to understand that. That way they can help the seller prepare, because they've already gone through this request for inspection repairs. Then the appraiser comes along and says, hey, buyer, you can't get your loan unless these things are fixed. And who fixes them? Well, the contract doesn't really say. It just says the buyer has to tell the seller. And typically it ends up being the seller fixing them, but the seller could put their foot down and go, that's for your loan, you fix it. So you need an agent that's strong enough that really understands that and just doesn't be the messenger of all these issues, rather than somebody that really protects your best interests. You could still take a backup offer. And if buyer number one, for some reason, defeats their contracts, like on inspection, or if they ask for stuff on appraisal, that's enough to open the door for buyer number 2 to get the house. And we know how to play that game. Very nerve-wracking for me, by the way. But for appraisal purposes, just one example would be for the government loans like VA, FHA. You want to check that your house doesn't have peeling paint. It's just safety stuff, missing outlet covers, broken windows, any trip hazards, broken fencing, all that kind of stuff. So we can help you do that. My name is Barb Schlinker. I'm the broker owner of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty and the host of this show. And it's called Your Real Estate Voice. And we're talking about whether or not a seller can bail out of a contract, or they have to just wait the whole process out. And when we come back, we're going to touch on a few things, some protections that we could put in place for you. If you are thinking of making a move, give us a call, 719-301 3900. We have over 28,178 buyers in waiting, and we can sit down and show you our buyers as well as give you a really good idea what your home will sell for. Richard?
Now, Barb, we're discussing the real estate contracts and provisions that can be inserted into the contracts to protect both buyers and sellers. We know that buyers have plenty of ways to get out of a contract, but what are some of the contract provisions that will actually help home sellers?
Well, look very carefully to see that your buyer has a house to sell or not. It's just one little date that's stuck in the table of dates and deadlines and one little sentence buried in paragraph 10. You want to make sure you read that contract, because if you're waiting for somebody else to sell your home, that's not a firm deal. You might wait for months. It may never happen. So you need to be aware of that and hire somebody that really knows how to handle sale contingencies to protect you. We not only know those things, but we can also back them up with our cash offer system, where we can get their home sold with a cash buyer. That way they can buy your home without a sale contingency. Earnest deposit pretty much goes back to the buyer unless you have other protections built into the contract. So we know how to do all this. So if you are thinking of making a move, you want to make sure that you work with somebody that really has your back, that knows how to give you certainty all the way through the process. So give us a call anytime, 719-301-3900, or go to barbhasthebuyers.com. Richard?
You're listening to Your Real Estate Voice with Barb Schlinker of Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty. And if you are thinking of making a move, call Barb at 719-301-3900 or visit barbhasthebuyers.com. A short intermission. When we come back, we'll be discussing how to sell your Colorado home and sell it for the very most money. Stay tuned for that.